my name's Ros, and I'm on the coordinating group with the Landworkers Alliance. I'm a market gardener and beekeeper, and also doing a PhD at the moment in agroecology and land ownership. And just wanted to say, firstly, thank you to Wales One World Film Festival for inviting us to do the film screening with them this evening. It was a really great film to watch, and yeah, really great program of films as well. And we are just hosting this like fairly informal and loose discussion for anyone that wanted to talk about the film and have any reflections on that. And we invited Adam Thorogood here this evening, who's a Landworkers Alliance member and also based in the Dyfi Valley. And yeah, as it's a Welsh-based film, and the kind of history and some work around the Dyfi Valley, we thought it would be nice to invite an LWA member along to kind of talk about the film a little bit and some of the work of LWA that's going on here. So yeah, if I think everyone's like pretty familiar with Zoom these days, but if you want to keep your video off, that's totally fine, though this is like quite an informal discussion, so it's also nice to have a sense of faces and names. If you want to put your name in the chat box and introduce yourselves, that's really nice, just to get a sense of where people are at. And yeah, Adam's just going to introduce himself and have a few reflections about the film, and then if we'll just kind of open it up to questions and discussions. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. We'll probably keep it open for about an hour tops, just to give you a sense of how long we're going to be here for as well. And yeah, thanks, Adam.
Okay. Can everyone hear us all right? Can you hear us all? Yeah, great. Okay, good. Thanks, Ros. My name's Adam Thorogood, and I live in the Dyfi Valley here in Wales, and I am an LWA member, as Ros mentioned. I am a forester, and I am a co-owner of a 12-hectare woodland, which is an ancient woodland which was planted with conifers in the mid-20th century, and we manage it using continuous cover forestry principles. I'm also a beekeeper. I've got 2 colonies currently, which have survived the winter, luckily. And I also work for the Woodland Trust in Wales, so I kind of do forestry advice for restoring ancient woodlands. So yeah, when Ros asked me to say a few words about this film, I was feeling like I wasn't necessarily the right person, because I don't have a background in water management, but I feel like living in the Dyfi Valley, you kind of rapidly become used to large deluges of water. It's currently raining really heavily outside, and I mean, we're living in an area which has often more than a metre of rainfall a year. So you know, compared to the landscapes we saw in the film, we've got a different issue, which we can go into. I'd like to talk about the different issues we have with rainfall. I mean, partly one of the big things we need to worry about here is the loss of topsoil through rainwater runoff. But you know, in talking about the film and looking at some of the issues that were highlighted in it, I think that one of the interesting things is the kind of how the film is really informed by the Anthropocene, by I think the filmmaker himself, who sort of appeared at various intervals to narrate, said that his life had been informed by loss and change, and I think that's something really important to bear witness to, that all of our lives at the moment are really informed by loss and change, and that's something to grieve, but also something to kind of inspire action. So I've written some notes, and some of the big things that like stood out for me were that this is really a kind of story of extractive capitalism, of like the rapidity in which Los Angeles was created. There was really, it was a really rapidly built metropolis, and it was built around the car. And really what we can see is this sort of linearity of the kind of capitalist model, which is kind of pulling and extracting things as much as possible, and then really not thinking about the kind of cyclical nature of the way in which nature works. So for me, that's one of the things that really stood out, was this kind of juxtaposition of linearity and the cyclical, of things moving in cycles, and particularly the fact that they were the kind of narrative. The film was held together by this narrative of this long distance walk along a pipeline, which really kind of, for me, just sort of exemplifies this extractive capitalism. And yeah, I really liked how the film kind of dipped in and out of different projects on the journey. And I thought that there's some of the big things that kind of came across were like the need to really slow this process of movement down, slow the process of water moving through the landscape, slow it down and capture it. There was lots of mention of receiving water and holding it. And I didn't realize that water above a certain temperature, soil above a certain temperature actually repels water. So a lot of these projects, I think, which were positive and put forward as kind of antidotes to this extractive use of water through this linear pipeline through the landscape, were looking at ways in which water could be slowed down and captured and then put to use, but also how these projects that were capturing water and slowing it down were also capturing other things as well. So they were capturing nutrients, they were also capturing people and energy and ideas. And I think that's one of the things that really came across, was that these agroecological projects all along the route that they were walking were acting as kind of nets in which things could be captured and slowed down and built up, and you can kind of actually initiate this sort of slow accretion of nutrients, slow accretion of knowledge, which nature actually tries to create if you let it. So yeah, I was quite interested in a lot of these kind of, which seemed very grassroots projects along the route. And then I was like really pleased to see that there was what seemed like a kind of citywide approach to looking at how they could actually deal with a lot of the problems that that LA has with its water. And an interesting use of kind of biomimicry. There was this one quote that I wrote down was trying to overlay a forest ecosystem over a city, which I thought was a really lofty approach. But they were doing some really interesting things in trying to slow this process of water movement down, capture it, and put it to good use within the city. And I thought it was really interesting how the film paid respect to the Paiute Shoshone people along who were really leading this journey, and it looked at and paid testament to the deep connection that the First Nation peoples have with the landscape, and talked a little bit about the history, the kind of ravaging that went on mainly through the 19th century of California and the Californian ecosystem, which largely, well, it's kind of a product of hundreds and hundreds of years of very close human interaction, which was kind of swept out of the way through this kind of the genocide of the American state. And I thought it was really interesting how the film also delved into the importance of fire within the ecosystems, but how really, in the way that it's been managed or mismanaged, that fire can just kind of create such a kind of destructive force, when actually fire was a very important part of the ecosystem, and was something that was kind of harnessed and understood by First Nation peoples, and without their management and sort of co-management of the ecosystem with the natural systems, how really it's just kind of open to this huge destruction that fire can bring. So the role of fire was really important. Yeah, I mean, I think the film mentioned healing a lot, and I think the process of the walk, this kind of pilgrimage, was a process of kind of knowledge accumulation, but also I guess a kind of ritual performance in the landscape of trying to kind of open themselves up to the process of healing, of understanding a kind of regeneration of that can come through a different approach to natural systems, and how we work with rather than trying to kind of extract nature's resources. So I think I'm going to leave it there for my rather rambling spiel at the start, but I really want to hear what other people thought as well. I mean, I like the film, and yeah, I really enjoyed watching it. So thanks for setting it up, Landworkers Alliance. Sort of open up to the floor, I guess. Does anyone want to comment? Or I could just keep talking like a kind of torrent of water.
I was wondering if anyone if anyone here is working with the land and has any sort of interesting water-based practices that they do, or any sort of yeah, I liked in the film, like the more spiritual connection with water and what that meant with the walk, and the practice of walking a route of the river. So I just wondered if anyone had anything to share about your own practices as well. It'd be really nice to hear. Yeah, and Katrin.
Yeah, well, I was just saying to Gwen earlier, I was really happy we came past our veg plot, and we just a few days ago, when it was still sunny, we made all the soil that I've been cultivating into ridges with little valleys. Imagine potato ridges that hasn't got anything in yet. And just how happy I was, because it has been absolutely tipping it down here. And we're obviously much more in the same problem as you, Adam, with too much water rather than not enough. And I think that would be really interesting to hear from other people where they're at with, you know, what on earth do you do when you can't get onto the land at all for when it's really urgent, because it's just so muddy or so, yeah, waterlogged all the time.
Yeah, good point.
Where are you two based? You're down in
Dartmoor.
Dartmoor, yeah.
I guess just a little response to that is how we have to think about it as a sort of catchment, at a catchment scale, and I mean, that's the thing, isn't it, that, you know, we can't think about it as our individual plots. If we're lucky enough to have or own or work a piece of land, that, you know, the problem stems from like further up, maybe the catchment, or, you know, it's looking at it in a landscape scale, which automatically kind of forces us into thinking beyond our boundaries, thinking about our neighbors, and, you know, thinking about things as a collective or as a whole. So, I mean, I think that started to come across through the film. But does anyone have any kind of, maybe any kind of ideas or thoughts about thinking about water at a catchment scale? Dana.
Hi. We're working, I live down in Charmouth in Dorset, and we're working just in the early stages of a couple of projects where we're looking at the River Char catchment, right from the springheads down to the Char mouth. And we're, again, very early stages, but we're hoping to kind of work with farmers on gathering or slowing down the flow in the upper reaches, and then looking at bioremediation to improve the quality of the water that's entering the river. So it's a community project that's just taking off, but it does seem to be generating quite a lot of interest and enthusiasm. And of course, it spins out in lots of different directions. It's a community building thing as well as an environmentally beneficial thing. So the film was fantastic. It was great timing to be able to see that tonight. So thank you.
That's great. So how has it been kind of trying to galvanise support and enthusiasm for that project?
Well, the upper char bit has sort of taken off really well, and we had a lot of public response to it. Getting volunteers on the ground hasn't been quite so easy as usual, but especially in the middle of winter. But yeah, so that's I think everybody's, I just don't think people were really that aware of the river. A lot of local people never walked it, never really visited it. There are quite a lot of footpaths, but so I think it's also about getting people out interacting with the environment and walking in the way that they walked in the film, to really appreciate the richness of it and the vital, the essentialness of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the thing about catchment, is it's often not apparent, is it, the extent with which it draws water from across the landscape. And yeah, I mean, I think I was just watching that thinking, right, I've got to plan a long distance walk this summer. But yeah, it was really inspiring to see like that group, walk that distance. And yeah, inspiring to kind of, yeah, what they chose to walk along, and yeah.
I was thinking it might be actually quite hard to walk the full length of a river in England or Wales.
It might be,
like
yeah. Access. Yeah.
And that would be interesting in itself to look at, like, yeah, how easy it is to access the full length of a river and what that means to how it's managed along the way. I've got a friend that does walk one of the tributaries to the Severn, but she's quite often like sneaking around, trespassing on through people's fields, and it's interesting. We were also thinking about organising like the LWA members who are in specific river catchments to do like river catchment assessment, and we obviously haven't managed to do that yet, but
as in a sort of water quality assessment.
Yeah. Yeah. Or just understanding the full, like the flow of the river and the different farming practices that happen down the river. And I think, does anyone live near a near a river that floods regularly? I mean, that is a big, yeah. So I mean, me and Ros live in the Dyfi Valley, and the Dyfi floods 3 or 4, 5 times a year, and actually stops the movement of traffic because the bridge floods and you can't use it. So our issue in the Dyfi Valley is really trying to kind of reduce the flow of water. And one of the big projects that's held up as a success, I don't know whether people have heard of it, is the Pont Bren project, which is actually not in the Dyfi catchment, but in the Severn catchment. And it was a kind of grassroots project that was created by a group of farmers who got together and did a lot of tree planting. So planted a lot of widened hedgerows and planted up riparian strips next to rivers, and have had a huge impact on reducing or slowing the flow of water. And because, as we all know, if we live in the UK, the Severn has a propensity to flood massively, and has caused a lot of damage to property, which was kind of maybe mistakenly built on floodplains. But yeah, I mean, does anyone have anything to speak to about our experience in the UK of water and flooding, and any kind of responses to that? Gwenda.
Hello. Well, I'm in the Dyfi Valley, and our major problem at the moment is high phosphates.
Okay.
And I'm sure that's just known about because actually Welsh Water are about the only water authority that do produce data. It's a, you know, I think most other water authorities are also polluting rivers, but they're not. They're somehow not releasing that information. So I think pollution, more than anything, is one of the greatest problems happening in rivers now. And that is because of the whole way that we do deal with water. We use water as a way of transferring all our waste.
Yeah.
You know, all our bodily waste, we're happy to just put down a water toilet. And, you know, you've just got to, don't have to have a lot of imagination to work out where that's actually ending up. You know, and water authorities for years have been saying, oh yes, we can deal with this. You know, they know exactly how to deal with it, but you know, that requires huge amounts of energy, which of course is now on the increase. So, you know, we're just going to see this getting worse.
Yeah.
You know, it's really not looking good for the future. And animals are constantly being blamed for polluting the rivers. You know, high phosphates is always to do with farm waste, which, you know, no doubtedly it is. But, you know, every time we have flooding, well, whenever we have high rainfall, of course, because in this country, I don't know whether people are aware, but we haven't really been able to build buildings that have separate stormwater drains. So when there's high rainwater, the stormwater from the rain mixes with water from our effluent. And that's just having to be released. And I know in the Dyfi, just in one station near us, it's for what's equivalent to 80 days every year, which to my reckoning is, well, that's 1/4 of the year. It's just being just going straight into the Dyfi. So, you know, we're not just getting flooding, we're getting flooding from, you know, from very polluted waters.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, there are big issues.
Yeah, so I guess one of the things around that is kind of design, is sort of ecological design, and you know, both with kind of the built environment, but also with our agricultural systems, but you know, kind of using water less within our waste systems, and you know, designing and using composting toilets and making those really part of our everyday lives, I guess, is a big step.
Well, you know, in cities, I think we have to bring in a night storage system, as they had, not night storage, sorry, it's an actual waste collection system, so that every day we have somebody coming around with a wagon collecting containers that we put outside our doors, containers that we have urinated into, and possibly put fecal material. But actually, I tend to think fecal material isn't the issue. It's the urine that's the real issue, because that's got all the micronutrients, everything we need to feed our earth. You know, it shouldn't ever be going into rivers. And it's completely sterile, it's not an issue. So I think there has to be some way in which we can collect that urine and compost it and actually have a proper business. And I've approached water authorities with this concept, because it would make it a lot cheaper for them.
Yeah. Do you know if anyone's done
rather than putting it in water? You know, I mean, why not?
Cost-benefit analysis of. Do you know if anyone's done any like crunched any sums on how much it would save them if they didn't have to treat water so much?
Well, no. An interesting one there.
Maybe that's what we need. Yeah, but
well,
you know,
it's all to do with fuel, you know, energy prices. I mean, can we afford even to treat these things in the future? And, you know, also, it's just a dirty thing to do, isn't it? You know, put our urine into water.
Yeah,
It's
I
actually, you know, against a lot of religious practices.
I like the thing you said at the start was that we're using our water as a kind of way to flush away all our waste, which I guess, you know, at the heart of it is you know, we've got ourselves into this system and we're just so over reliant on it. You know, and how could we change that? And maybe as individuals or as communities we can approach it. But I think that's what the film for me was putting across, is that there are kind of community approaches to solutions, but then also it seemed as though there was like a pretty big kind of citywide approach to a solution. So yeah, I guess that is the thing, is maybe in our communities we've got much more agency, but then, you know, I think a lot of this really does need kind of work at a different level, maybe.
Although it could be tackled at a community level, because,
well, absolutely, yeah,
you know, it's all, you know, the amazing thing about urine is that it's not actually a waste product. It's something, we just can't store it, that's all. So why not store it outside our bodies, mixed with something like sawdust, in a wood chip.
Has anyone got any
grow stuff?
Does anyone use urine at all? Does anyone save it? any have we got any examples here? Oh, Dana.
No, I don't save it now, but I used to use it. It's a practice known as amaroli in yoga circles. It's great for your skin, your hair, etc. And as Gwenda says, it's a sterile thing. But my experience of introducing the practice to students, I got them pouring salt water up their noses. Next stage was
the neti pots.
Yeah, exactly. And it's and obviously doing that, but introducing that idea to people who'd already come to yoga, not just to sort of bend and stretch and do the fashionable yoga stuff, but, you know, more energetic healing stuff with it. That was a step. The idea of getting some people on the 6th floor of an apartment building in a town to start thinking, you want me to pee into a bucket now, and we're going to go down in the lift with this, and you want me to do what with it? It's but it's I'm just briefly, it did occur to me while I was watching this beautifully put together film, I was interested with the psychology of what it was, and I thought it was an immaterial thing, but this kind of loops back, is the psychology of some people that didn't ask the people who are surviving in the areas, how do you do this? But then when you're building these big cities and you've got all this runoff, what was the psychology and the social thing of it to get rid of that spare water? You're only a few miles from the desert. And forgive my social ignorance on this, but it's like, what was going on with that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I guess it's the thinking behind, or the lack of thinking behind, urban planning, isn't it? It's I guess it goes kind of to the heart of the capitalist model, really, of trying to just like remove a problem as quickly as possible, treating it as a problem rather than looking at it as a resource. And I think that maybe it goes back to the very rapid urbanization which happened within the Los Angeles area, that it just really grew up into a metropolis faster than any other city on earth, maybe, that the rapidity with which LA was created, and they really didn't have time to kind of build in any sustainable systems. But they seem to be kind of starting to sort of retrofit them, which is one of the positive things I saw from the film.
Yeah.
And Catherine.
It's Gwen this time, but anyway.
Sorry, Gwen.
I was just thinking as well about them trying to get rid of all this water. It was just, surely they transferred like technologies and design ideas from wet countries, from where, like, I don't know, when it was first invented, it was probably a sort of efficient, good idea, but then
it was transferred to, like you say, a desert, and it makes zero sense anymore, but it was just the done thing, and no one stopped and went, what does this place need? That was never a moment.
Yeah, I think the guy who was, I can't remember his name, who was sort of introducing the kind of sustainable urban drainage stuff towards the end of the film. I mean, he mentioned biomimicry, which you know, he was trying to he was talking about looking at a forest ecosystem and how there's a kind of capturing and a storage and a re-release of water. And you know, I was inspired by his approach, and I there's yet to see kind of how much that does really impact on things in LA. But yeah, I mean, it seems like there's a gradual like reapproach to the water as a resource rather than a problem, which I was glad to see. Actually, yeah, one of the things towards the end of the film, one of the Paiute Shoshone representatives who was actually on the walk, he said that the lake was calling to the water. So that the Owens Valley Lake was calling to the water, but LA said no. And I thought that was really interesting, because for me that kind of came to the heart of what we're looking at here. It's like that the water wants to kind of move with this path of least resistance, and it's naturally flowed into this Owens Valley lake, which you know, we saw at the start was completely dry. And it's like the energy that goes into like diverting the natural course of things. And it felt like, you know, that I thought that was really interesting how he said LA says no, which was just like, actually, if LA stopped saying no, what would happen? You know, where would the water go? And yeah, that was interesting for me anyway. Yeah, any more watery points that anyone wants to make? I've got some more stuff to say. I guess in Wales, it's kind of, I feel like it's the opposite. Like I said at the start, we've got kind of maybe too much water. And one of the interesting things is that actually what's happened in the past is that valleys have been flooded and villages have been relocated in order to create reservoirs for cities in England. So people might know about Tryweryn, which was a village which was flooded in order to create a reservoir. And yeah, I feel like that's kind of interesting to juxtapose that with what's going on in the film in LA. Is that kind of Wales has often been used as a kind of a resource, and that resource has been extracted for use across the border. So there's, you know, the movement of Coed Cadw, which is to remember Tryweryn, the village, which is now, you know, underwater under this lake, which I think is, you know, really interesting kind of juxtaposition to what's going on in the film. Judy.
I think just what I want to say is that I think we should just perhaps try and love water more. Just love it. The more we respect things, the more we treat them with respect. And I feel that perhaps sometimes we tend to see the natural world as a resource for our own needs, even if we are very caring in the way we look at that. And perhaps we should just slightly shift our perspective to just see what a rather wonderful and extraordinary phenomenon it is as part of the natural world, which is wonderful and extraordinary. And maybe, you know, just go, like fishermen go to the river to fish, but they go to the river to see the river and enjoy and reflect on the river environment. And maybe we should do that, perhaps just go to somewhere to look at it, to sit and reflect. And if we all had more of that kind of relationship with the natural world, including water, it will naturally bring with it greater respect and a greater sense that we are having to respond to its needs, as well as thinking about our own needs, actually. I don't know that I can say more than that.
That's great. No, that's great, Judy. Thanks for that. Yeah.
Well, I really liked in the film that near the end they gave the river agency in saying that like humans have been trying to control it, but the water will, the water will try and control us, or the water will control us, and seeing like, yeah, the agency of water and non-human things in our lives, and understanding that a bit more, whether that's like yeah, whatever impact that has on us. So I thought it was really good to bring that out in the film, and yeah, like loving and respecting the water, definitely. I think you can only do that if you kind of see the agency of the water as well, and in its own right. So it was really nice. It's really nice that you brought that, Judy.
Yeah, thanks, Judy.
Yeah, we don't know your name.
Your iPad.
So I'm Grace, but yeah, I just liked how, yeah, you were like linking it back to Wales and how this is obviously like in a Welsh film festival thing, because I think Wales does obviously, I think the broken water cycle is particularly evident in Wales. I'm a recently graduated vet, and I'm trying to like learn more this year about things like regenerative agriculture, and especially trying to learn more about the water cycle, because like I just see that how it's affecting animal health and welfare so much. And like even so, I've just been lambing at a pretty conventional farm in the uplands. I live in Prestatyn, in North Wales, a lot along the coast, and even there, sort of at the bottom of the hill, that they put their sheep out on those fields, and it had rained like relatively heavily about 5 days ago, and the fields there, was still quite waterlogged, a lot of the fields in certain places. And I said to one of the older farmers, so they're 5th generation farmers that work there. So I spoke to his dad, so the 4th generation one, and I said, "Oh, do you find that you can't put sheep on those fields because they're so waterlogged?" And he said, "It's a very funny land down there." Because he said it must be sand or something, because it's so dry, like where there's no water, but where there is divots, it will collect and it will just stay, because like 5 days later there was still water there and it hadn't rained since. So even though it's sort of not maybe on these conventional farmers' radar about like the actual processes that are happening, they are picking up on like the strange sort of things are occurring that's not quite normal. And yeah, I think it's sort of starting from the uplands, where it's often really heavily overgrazed, and it creates such a watershed for these sort of lowland villages and communities. Yeah, starting there probably.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think it's really important looking at this reconnecting the loop, isn't it? We're talking a lot about water flowing away, taking things away, but then it's like looking at the cause and effect. And I think that high levels of upland sheep grazing really compacts the land. Also, things like clear felling forestry in the uplands as well leads to kind of huge amounts of water runoff. And I think that's what we kind of see in the floodplains in the lowlands, is the kind of effect of that. But then it's not often cast back to look at the cause of that effect. I think that's what we don't do enough of, is and it's there to see, isn't it, that in the flow of water, it's like there's a reason for this happening. Can we link this all together? And for me, I guess that's not happening enough, really, that kind of linking back to what the cause is of the effects we're seeing and we're finding. Oh, Finn, is that a hand? Or are you just, yes. You were.
And Adam, yes. Very much enjoying the discussion. Just something about that thread made me think about the water that isn't seen. Like I wondered if you wanted to speak about peat or like the water that's stored underground, fossil water, this idea about fossil water, the water that isn't supposed to be in the same biotic cycle of, the water supposed to be stored,
Do you want to say something about it?
I'm just thinking of my post-dinner coma,
Oh, okay. That's fine then. Yeah, no, I mean, virtual water as well is a huge thing.
Yeah, that's another thing, yeah.
I think I just ate I might have eaten a pepper that came from Spain. I don't know, which has got a huge amount of water in it.
Straight away.
That's the virtual water that's kind of unseen in this sort of trade cycle. But yeah, I mean, our peat bogs in the UK, they sequester huge amounts of carbon, and it's so important because it's a wet environment, it's a wet habitat. And what's happened in the 20th century is that water again has been like channeled and drained away in order to create in order to plant forests. And that's a big move now, is to try and re-wet some of these degraded peatlands and try and re-wet them and sink this water into this peat habitat. And along with that water, we get the growth and the accretion of the moss from the sphagnum, and we get these huge reservoirs of carbon. So yeah, I mean, that's, again, it's all about slowing the flow. It's about looking at cause and effect. It's about not being so extractive. It's about being joined up. All of these things which are coming from this film, all of these things which come from water as a kind of, as a symbol, as a metaphor. So yeah, thanks for that point. Gwen.
That, what you're just saying made me think of how linked the carbon cycle is to this whole discussion. It was mentioned quite a lot in the film.
It was, yeah.
Well, I haven't finished it yet, but so far. And like, it's they're both cycles, and they're both feeding to one another, and it's all to do with the plants that, like, they're both very reliant on the plants and the animals and the soil, and they've got a lot of this, there's a lot of overlap in the two issues with climate change, and climate is both them together, I suppose.
Yeah absolutely. I mean, in the film they talk a lot about healthy soil. I mean, that's along with the kind of water and fire. I think the soil, the earth, is a very elemental film, isn't it? But that's another really important factor, is that these things aren't single water flow. It's the water connects together all of these things, and a healthy soil, they were talking about it as a sponge, and having enough pores within the soil to kind of take on water. So and a healthy soil will be accreting and building up carbon. So I think you're right, Gwen. That's a really important point, that we can't look at these things in isolation. We've got to kind of bring them together in a holistic approach. Absolutely. Yeah. I think should we leave a little bit of a silence, because it seems like sometimes when there's a silence, then thought processes start to happen. Oh, Arif, you've got your hand up, but we can't see you, but that's okay.
Yeah, I'll leave my camera off if that's okay.
That's fine, no problems.
Yeah, well, like probably many people here, I'm very inspired by the indigenous communities, particularly in North America and Canada, who kind of, self-identify as water protectors, and they're engaged in very radical action, direct action against pipelines and all sorts of fossil fuel construction projects. And it makes me wonder, you was mentioned that, over here, our rivers are horrendously polluted. And it just made me wonder, maybe I'll throw this out there, that we maybe need to become water protectors here as well. And what would that actually mean in practice? Do we need to get much more radical, start putting our bodies on the line? Who would we go after? Would we go after the sort of the water companies, you know, who are most responsible for this? Other maybe irresponsible farmers, that kind of thing. I don't know. So yeah, just a thought, just putting that out there. Be interested to see what people think.
Thanks for that, Ari. Thanks a lot. Yeah, does anyone want to speak to that? I mean, I've got something. Oh yeah, David.
Hi, yes. So I'm part of a grouping sort of called Save the Wye, which is a network of organisations up and down the whole river. And last summer we organised a walk along the Wye, which is, you know, fairly similar to the film. And we took some water from Plynlimmon, the source, and carried it in a kind of relay down to Chepstow, where the Wye meets the Severn. And, you know, out of that group of people just doing that as a sort of witness to the state of the river, which is just dying in front of us, you know, 2 years to save the Wye is what the agencies say, you know, this iconic river. But out of it, I mean, there were two things, a few things we were asking people, one of which was to cherish the river, which is what Judy was saying, really, just to get out there, walk along it, you know, see what you can see a kingfisher, love it. And then we'll protect it and we'll get active in the way that Arif was talking about. You know, we'll get angry and we'll get, you know, powerful to defend our rivers. And the other thing that came out of it was 600 citizen scientists who are now testing water up and down the Wye and kind of putting the Environment Agency and Natural Resources Wales and everybody on watch to say, look, you know, this is your job, you should be doing this. But as citizens, we care so much about this river that we're prepared to do it as volunteers, but we want you to act on what you find. And then you look at the Environment Agency, which is just a hollowed out organisation that has lost all of its sort of, you know, what it was set up to do because of the cuts and because of the kind of culture that's come in there. And, you know, it's only through us collectively acting that we're going to stop our water just being, you know, a shit sewer, as Gwen has said. And, you know, for us, like Gwen said, it's the phosphates. You know, 60% of the pollution here is agricultural pollution. And that mostly comes because there's 20 million chickens in the catchment of the Wye.
Yeah.
There are industrial, you know, units here that, you know, that's not farming, it's industry. But, you know, they can put this all up and it's all feeding Avara / Cargill, you know, in Hereford, who are one of the 5 really big commodity, you know, producers and distributors and traders in the world. They're destroying the Amazon to produce soya to feed to chickens in Hereford that shit in the Wye, you know, it just washes straight into the Wye. And so, you know, those are the people we should be going after. You know, those are the people we should be witnessing against and saying, look, it's not okay. You know, the basis of civilization is clean water and you're destroying our water, you know. So I think there are targets and I think there are things we should do. You know, we could talk for a long time, but, you know, privatizing, I mean, the water companies was a disaster. You know, they must be taken back into public ownership. You know, it's as simple as that. You know, you can't have all this money going to shareholders and chief executives and so on and not being spent on the infrastructure. You get what you pay for, you know. So there, you know, I think there are things we can do. And I think actually from a year ago when we did the walk to now, there's been a massive change. You know, there's been Environment Committee report about it. There's been, you know, there's been fines, there's been, you know, a lot more has come on, you know, media spotlight. You know, now we find if we go to the press and the TV, they want to cover the story. So, you know, I think there's a momentum in this. And I think most people don't think their water is as shitty as it is, you know, and they would pay, you know, to sort it out. So I think it's a campaign we can win.
Great, thanks, David. That's really inspiring. Have you got anywhere we could look for more information on your campaign, Save the Wye?
Yeah, I mean, look on Friends of the Upper Wye, Friends of the Wye. There are, you know, you can find the website. Yeah, you know, I mean, obviously I could talk more about it, but
great. Thank you for sharing that.
Will you do the walk again, David? Or do you think you'd do a different sort of?
This summer we're going to do something which is Wye July.
Okay.
So that's 8th, 9th, 10th of July. We're going to do events because we did events in all the towns, you know, Hereford, Hay, you know, Monmouth, Chepstow. So we're going to concentrate on doing events that are public facing to get people.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, we'll look out for that. We've got iPad has got a hand up, and then Dana after that. Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, just to sort of like draw on the point of cherishing the water and sort of like teaching that side of it before I think maybe expecting activism of people. Just something that like I see real scope for in, well, I just see it in sort of my area of Wales, at North Wales in particular, but I guess a lot of Wales, is, so say if you've got these it could be on farmland or other land, I guess, but like farmland, sort of having these chain of ponds or lakes or whatever used to slow down the water flow, and then incorporating that into like an agro-tourism or like sustainable tourism thing, because I think we're seeing, especially through COVID now, the complete influx of tourism to certain areas of North Wales is already quite big of a tourist industry, and is sort of massively boomed, and I think, you know, it can leave it leaves damage. There's sort of more pollution, there's more litter, it gets local people's backs up unnecessarily, I think, because they feel that like they're not really benefiting from any of this tourism, whereas I do feel like the tourists themselves, you know, it's not, if they're only going to sort of North Wales to go to the beach, like other parts of the world are always going to win, because if you just wanted to try and get a bit of sun, then it's not really any competition. Whereas if you actually enter the sort of countryside and using water in this, I think is such sort of like a pivotal point, because I think a lot of people are just naturally drawn to water and enjoy looking at it, and sort of involving it in tourism activities like, I don't know, fishing or wild swimming spots that they could pay a small fee to use a farmer's land, and sort of just reimagining tourism with water in it as well.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. It's great, good point. Yeah, okay. Can we go to Dana?
Well, actually, that's kind of covered what I was going to say.
Okay.
iPad did, but could I quickly just ask David if his experience of what he's done on the River Wise, just really what we're hoping to achieve on a much smaller scale down here in Charmouth. So David, would it be possible for me to contact you? Oh, I think he's just disappeared.
Might still be able to hear you.
Outside of this chat, outside of this forum, just to sort of ask you a few questions.
Yeah, I'll put my email address in the chat. Can I do that? Yeah.
That would be brilliant. Thank you very much.
I am also the festival director here, so you can just get me a Dave at WOW. You know, one more.
Oh, okay. Yeah? Brilliant.
Great.
Well, thanks for putting on such a great festival.
Yeah. One thing I just wanted to ask David is, you mentioned you had a kind of citizen science project with people doing water testing. How did you organise the training for that? I'm really interested in how people kind of got kind of skilled up into doing that.
I mean, that's been done by various organisations. Friends of the Upper Wye have done some. Wye Salmon Association, people talked about the anglers. They know more about the river than just about anybody. And the Council for Protection for Rural England, Herefordshire. You know, we were sort of working in partnership. We're a kind of network of half a dozen organisations, so we were just working in partnership with them to kind of recruit people. And they've done training in village halls and stuff, and it's fairly simple. You go along, spend an hour, and then you have some kit, and then you can go off and do it once a week, you know, on your local river. So yeah, I mean, it's quite straightforward. You know what I mean? I mean, these things always look complex until you start doing them, and then it's just kind of, you know, a step, and it's, you know, all the information goes to Cardiff University. It's all been kind of collated. I think the issue for us is, does anybody act on it? You know, you can learn how shitty the river is, but you probably know that already. You're just putting science into it. Will the Environment Agency actually take action? You know,
I guess people can act as an early warning system as well, because if there's like a massive effluent, event in the river, then there's going to be someone pretty quickly carrying out some water testing. So, I mean, I guess you've got the kind of constant level of the health of the river, but then also where you've got some kind of slurry event, then you've got someone pretty quickly, hopefully, like.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Okay.
You could bring up your water, local water board and Welsh Water, and you can give them pictures, film of fish dying in a tributary of the Wye, and they go, well, it's 5 o'clock, and no, we can't get anybody out tonight, it'll be dark, and then well, we'll come tomorrow. No dead fish. Oh, okay, well, it's all gone now, isn't it? I mean, they are amazingly incompetent and under-resourced, and one of the things that came out of some of what we did, and there are lots of other organisations doing this, was they employed a few more people. But, I wouldn't hold out a lot of hope that our government is going to act on this in the way that it should. So I think that's when you come back to, I think it was Arif's question about what do you then do?
Yep. Okay, we've got a Gwenda, then a Dana, and Finn looked almost like they might be wanting to say something, but I'm not sure. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'd like
Dana,
to reiterate something that David said, which is we have to nationalise our water authorities. We lost control. We gave it to private companies, and I'm afraid, people have just abrogated their responsibility. People just imagine that these things will be done. Somebody will be sorting it, but they don't. And as David says, they're under-resourced. So, I'd like to put some hope into the Environment Agency, the NRW, but really we have to nationalise our water, and we have to work, until that's done, we have to work as communities and actually just get some manpower in there. And Wales has got a great history of getting people together to make things happen. And being on the Dyfi, I'm down at the estuary of the Dyfi. We have talked with people in the upper reaches in Tregaron and Coed Cadw and Lampeter, looking at, it was mainly Himalayan balsam, but there are things that can connect all the different waterways. And I think, we have to do that. But at the same time, I can't impress enough that actually we really need to get control of our rivers again, because what's happened is that all our wetlands have actually been just sold off. In England, it's horrendous how St. George, is it? They've just taken over all the water holding capacities of rivers and built these amazing riverside developments. And suddenly river developments became all the rage. And the people who went to live in them said, ooh, actually, they're a bit smelly and there are a lot of rats around. Is this really is this really that desirable? And, the whole thing is I'm afraid, it's a complete and utter mess.
Okay,
so we have to work on nationalising a water authority. Number one.
And holding current water agencies to account when we can, I guess. Okay, so we've got it's like just gone just past 9:30. So we've got 2 more points that I think people want to make, and then we'll see. Is everyone happy to carry on for a little bit longer? So Dana and then Finn.
Thanks. I just wanted to mention our dialogue with farmers. I don't mean sort of like small scale, smallholder, very environmentally sensitive farmers, but general farmers. I had a really interesting meeting early this week with a fantastic farmer who's doing everything he can to make his land. He's an organic farmer, so he's very much on message, but he stressed the point that environmentalists have to be really careful that they don't piss the farmers off to the point where they stop listening. So we've got to try and understand how it is to be a farmer and how it is to try and work the land within their economic situation and the current guidelines that they're being encouraged to work to. And we have to try and effect change by dialogue rather than telling farmers what to do. And I thought that was a really interesting message, because it's very easy, I think, as somebody who isn't a farmer, to sort of get on my high horse about how things should be done, but actually to understand the constraints and the problems that farmers are facing, rather than just bashing them over the head with a green stick. And I don't mean to say I condone any of what they're doing, but there's a way of approaching it, I think, which it was really helpful to hear that message from this farmer. So that's what we're aiming to do around here.
Yeah, really important point. Thanks, Dana.
Thank you.
Finn.
Hi. I really hope that farmer wasn't an intensive chicken farmer, because that's a really different, I feel more this year to stop high, like that's different. And I think a lot of farmers were sold this idea that the future of farming was this intensive chicken, battery hens in barns, and it's a really dead end, and we're spending a lot of energy trying to fight that. And it's creating a false antagonism with the farming community, because we're not against farming, we're on specific types of. But I digress. That's not the observation I wanted to make. I wanted to go back to that point about taking control of our rivers, because from where I'm looking, water companies are looking really bad. I mean, I completely applaud the Riverside, the citizen science initiatives. It's really exciting to go out with a pocket tester to a river and get some, and be a first responder to a pollution event. But actually, these companies look really bad. I could send you news clippings of consecutive news reports. The Environmental Agency has issued record level fine after record level fine since almost 5 years ago. Like it's not, so the punitive mechanisms, the fine mechanisms, it's all over the press. You could collate Guardian, Independent, news clippings. Ofwat is, the regulatory agency that patrols river quality. They're all over it. So it's not, but what is the piece that's missing? These companies look bad. We're fining them, we know the situation. What is the barrier to nationalization? This is a massive political hot potato, and it seems impossible. It actually, does anyone in this call believe that we can actually nationalize anything? It's a political hot potato. What is the These guys look bad. They're doing a bad job. It's not denouncing, I don't feel that we're short of denouncing,
Does Ofwat have any teeth? Does Ofwat?
I'm saying that none of these people have any teeth. That's the thing. Yeah. The teeth of the Environmental Agency is to issue a fine.
Yeah.
27 million, I think, is the highest fine that the Environmental Agency has issued. They don't actually recover those costs. These companies just kind of claim they can't pay, or, what's actually happening after that fine is issued beyond the headline, David.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I suppose it's talking to that idea about whether you could ever get privatisation. And obviously this is just an ideological issue for the Conservative Party. Yeah. And essentially, if you worship at the feet of Thatcher, you can't possibly think it could have gone wrong. Having said that, I talked to my local Tory MP. He completely understands the issue, the why. He realises sort of what the problems are. He will just never, I don't think, vote to change that.
But
so
it wouldn't be a
essentially what you're doing, isn't it, is creating a national conversation that says, withdraws the social consent, really, for this kind of way of running things. And, it's only when you get a Labour Party or an alternative party in government that you might actually see that happen, because it might happen with the railways, because it would obviously make sense there. There's actually the financial argument for deprivatizing these things is huge. Because we're already just spending, the railways, we're just spending that money already, So, there may come a time, and all you're doing is trying to prepare the way for that, isn't it? And make it more socially acceptable for more people to do that. I think that's the best you can offer.
Yeah, good point. Thank you.
So Gwen and
oh yeah,
and Katrin.
Yeah, good point.
No, you did it. It's fine. I somehow saw in the chat earlier that somebody was here from North Devon, and I remember hearing about a mayor in one of the smaller towns. It could have even been Barnstaple, really working hard to address the serious flooding issues in the area, and they were doing that somehow by really working towards introducing beavers and working with farmers and people upstream, and thinking also about the idea with the ecotourism. you would get a lot of people on board. Obviously, you know, there'd be farmers who didn't want their land slightly flooded nearer the river. But I think that, you know, we've talked a lot about the efforts of convincing and educating and everything. But I just think, yeah, it'd be great. I don't actually know, you know, anyone in person who's managed to introduce beavers on their land, but yeah.
Yeah, tourism draw.
Definitely tourism draw, I would imagine.
Tourism, I think.
We've watched them in Poland once, but not.
There are various projects, and I mean, there's a whole series of kind of environmental impact assessments that have to be you have to go through in order to work towards reintroducing beavers in certain landscapes. I mean, in the Dyfi there are two instances of beavers which are in kind of fenced off areas, and there is a big push at the moment. The wildlife trusts have got a project to reintroduce beavers to the Dyfi. But I think beavers are in the environment much more widespread way than we realise. they're quite secretive and nocturnal, and I think there's a lot more beavers out there than we know. But yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, bringing back kind of these ecosystem engineers, beavers, in order to kind of, you know, help us slowing the flow. It's a big thing, but it's also another kind of long and slow process, and it's, you know, for some people might think it's a great idea, and you know, a lot of farmers are very concerned about it. So I think, you know, with all of this kind of case studies and examples of where things have worked and sharing information is really inspiring, and that can help kind of sway people and change people's minds a little bit. I think we're probably going to wrap up, unless there's any like major burning points. I mean, I found this really inspiring, this discussion, and it's particularly the kind of looking at the quality of our rivers and how our systems at the moment are just really not working. And yeah, I think I'm going to take from this a lot more. I'm really going to just look into water quality within the Dyfi catchment, and yeah, I found this really, really inspiring. And so thanks a lot for a lot of the points that people have made. Is there a way of saving the chat? Because we've got quite a lot of interesting links within the chat, or at least saving.
Yeah, I can save the chat, and I think we can probably send it to.
We could put some of the links, could we?
Yeah, to the people.
We can save it ourselves, I think.
That's true. You can save it yourself. Yeah.
Great. Click on the three little dots. I learned this just last week. It was like, oh my, it's a miracle.
Yeah, great. Thanks, yeah, the three little dots do a lot, don't they?
I know.
Thanks,
do you know
Shakti.
how do I change my name? Like, how do I get rid of my iPad? Because I'm trying to figure it out.
So if you're on an iPad, you need to go to, is it participants and the little arrow?
Can you see participants?
Oh yeah, okay, that's it. I didn't click the one button on that.
And then you should be able to like click on it and change your name from there.
Yeah, change.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for that. At the end of the session.
The Zoom tutorial. Sorry, I did brush over that very quickly at the beginning. Yeah, thank you everyone. That was a really great conversation. Dana, you wanted
to. I'm sorry, I don't want to lose the chat, and I don't know how to save it on an iPad. Could you just quickly go over that?
So in the if you've got the chat box open,
yeah,
in the bottom right hand corner there's 3 dots in a row, and if you click on that you should have the option of saving the chat.
That, Steph, oh no, they're just waving goodbye. Sorry, I think they were going to say.
Sorry, I don't get the dots, so.
Yeah, you've got an iPad, haven't you? Or a
Could you? Is it possible to just send me a link to these another way? A link to the chat? Is that? Or
should be able to. I think. I'm just going to say. Actually, you could email me.
Okay.
At the Landworkers Alliance. Thanks. I just wanted to say thank you to David. He's maybe gone though.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, don't worry. For organising the festival, and yeah, thanks for everyone for coming along. If you are interested in finding out more about the Landworkers Alliance and you don't already know about us, feel free to visit our website, and you can join as a member if you're a land worker or you can join as a supporter if you're not a land worker but want to support our work. And there's some information about that on our website as well. And yeah, thanks so much for Adam. That was really well held conversation.
Yeah, no, thanks everyone for all your points. And I think we did a really good job at like really talking about a UK situation in Wales and the borders in England. You know, so you know, we used the inspiration of LA to really focus it down on things that matter to us. So yeah, thanks for bringing all your points and all your experience and wisdom. Really nice to meet you and see your faces. So yeah, have a lovely evening,
Great.
everyone.
Enjoy your weekend.